thank you. And we welcome everybody signing on eventually. And we want to welcome you to the inaugural edition of the FPMA Young Member Seminar Series. This is going to be a recurring seminar series and was designed to serve as an educational and professional resource for FPMA young members. FPMA recognizes you as the future of the profession and wishes to provide tools and resources necessary for success now and throughout the life cycle of your podiatric career. These seminars will follow an every other month pattern, and future seminars will feature some of the following topics: medical legal, coding, reimbursement, and finance. Should you have suggestions for future seminar topics, please send them to admin@fpma.com. That's admin@fpma.com. I'll put that in your comment section in just a minute. Now, I encourage all of you to stay connected. Number one, at the end, we're going to have a lot of question options. So you feel free to drop in your questions. This is very informal. So we definitely welcome questions. I think that's the only way you'll learn and get what you need out of this. And also, there'll be a surprise. There'll be a random drawing for a $100 American Express gift card. Yes, you got it, $100. So you must be present you must be present on the call to be eligible. So let's get started. Everyone, unless you're speaking, please remain on mute. So thank you for the example there. Please remain on mute. That means you, the guy that's making a noise. Thank you very much. And should you have a question, raise your hand or put it in the chat, and FPMA staff will alert either Dr. Perler or.
Okay, just bring your money because I'm not buying the food, especially if I'm not eating.
Hello, just as a reminder, please put yourself on mute. We appreciate it. Thank you. There'll be a chance for discussion later. Okay, so it looks like we have right now 26 participants. We'll get started. So my first question, the format here is going to be, Dr. Perler and I came up with several questions that we're going to be introducing we think are really important, and we'll kind of talk through some of the answers, and that might stimulate you all to have some conversation or excuse me, some questions. So feel free to place those in the chat box or raise your hand. So Dr. Perler, my first question to you is, what are fellowships? What are podiatric fellowships?
Well, that's a broad question. So basically, I take it most of the people on the call are either finishing up residency, or I know of one that was just maybe starting a residency soon. And then there are some people that have been out in practice. So basically what we've seen in our profession is when I came out, and I think when Andrew came out, there were mostly 2-year residencies, and then there were some 3 years. And so the 3 years were the really coveted residency. And then if you look at the orthopedic foot and ankle training world, they've always done what they call fellowship. So they had their 5-year base of residency, and then they did a 1-year specialization fellowship. What we've seen in podiatry is, as we've pushed as a profession to become more unified and kind of level the playing field between residencies, we've seen this transition to a 3-year residency for all. And I think that's fantastic, because it does give us a little bit more parity in terms of people understanding what our training is, because a lot of us have doctors that we know that didn't even do residencies. They did a clerkship or just came right out of podiatry school. So it was really hard from the outside looking in to determine who's done what kind of training. And I think that the 3-year residency program has really helped our profession. But the question is how do you differentiate yourself beyond that? If you have a specialty interest, or you feel like your residency prepared you for some things pretty well, but there are other things that maybe you didn't prepare as well. That's where we've kind of come across these fellowships. And it started out, about 15 years ago or 16 years ago, there was only about 2 or 3 fellowships that were available. None of them were recognized, and definitely not CPME approved. And what we've seen in the past, even 5 to 7 years, is just this tremendous growth of opportunity with fellowships, with more fellowship sites starting. You see ACFAS understanding the importance of it by coming up with a recognition program, and then CPME coming up with a approval program. So that in a nutshell is fellowship, and really the question will be answered throughout the evening as we go through our questions, because I think that there's a number of reasons to do fellowships, which is what Andrew and I are going to talk about. Andrew, what do you think? Where do you think fellowships came from, and what's the importance to our profession?
I think I echo what you said. I mean, fellowships, I think, have evolved over time, and they're becoming more popular because of several factors, and some we may not want to face. Number one being is if a resident is feeling a little bit incomplete in their training, they want to supplement it with either additional cases, they want to get additional training in a specific area that they don't feel comfortable in, or that they feel like they've been underserved in. I also think that sometimes they do it for confidence, for mentorship, to learn a little bit more one-on-one. You know, in a residency program, frequently you're one amongst many, and so you don't get that individualized one-on-one mentorship as you might get in a fellowship. And the way I look at it is also it's more of a fine tuning of your skill set, you know, as opposed to just learning, surgical skills or patient skills or whatnot. So I think the one-on-one factor, but for me, it's actually evolved into being more of a mentorship, both, you know, in your surgical experience and your non-surgical care, as well as just somebody to be that pillar for you to aspire to or surpass. And what I like to tell all my fellows is, you know, I want you to do better than me, because, you know, it's an ever learning scenario. And one of the reasons why I felt like I wanted to open up my fellowship was to just continue that learning process. And even to this day, I learn every week, every day, you know, something different.
I think that's a great point. One thing that we hear a lot, and I've heard this a number of times, is people saying, well, you know, I did a pretty good residency. You know, why would I spend another year working as a quote unquote glorified resident when I can go out and make more money than I would make as a fellow? And, you know, hopefully that's not an easy question to answer, but hopefully as we get through tonight's questions, we'll answer some of that. One thing I was going to say just about the financial impact of doing a fellowship is you really can't think short term. I mean, short term, yes, you are absolutely right. You will make more money in a first year contract in most associateships than you would in a fellowship year. Fellowships are not really meant to make a lot of money while you're doing the fellowship, but it's really short-sighted to think that way, because what happens is once you're fellowship trained, there's a lot of assets that you have that you wouldn't have had before. And I think that becomes invaluable later on. And I'm a really good example. And I kind of look at this as future proofing your degree to an extent. You know, I had many fellowships when I came out. We didn't have the full 1 year fellowships readily available. And I would say that 15 years into my career, and my family decided it was time for a change, and we decided to move from Indianapolis to Florida. That fellowship training opened a lot of doors for me that probably would not have been opened. And that's partly how I ended up in an orthopedic group that has fellowship training specialists. So I think that the fellowship training kind of future-proofed my degree. So I can say that, you know, maybe it doesn't make you a lot of money while you're doing the fellowship, but later on, it really can help you with your job hunt.
Yeah, I actually thought about this a lot, and I was talking to Calvin Rushing, who did a little study on this. He came actually to our SAM meeting and gave a lecture. He actually proved that fellows, podiatric fellows, actually make more money in the long run compared to those who didn't do a fellowship. So that was kind of an interesting study that he did. So I think it is an investment in your future. And not that that's the only reason to do it, but, you know, I think that, you know, it's different for everybody, and everybody needs something different out of these potential opportunities. You know, there are certainly plenty of residency programs out there who actually do very well. They get well-rounded experiences. And if you're confident enough, you know, you can go out and practice fine. You don't need to do to do a fellowship. But for some of us, I think it's very beneficial to have that added. I will say that some practices, they when I talk to them about potential networking for our fellows to join their groups or whatnot, and then when I hear of some residents who want to apply for jobs, and in my inquiry to other practices, some of the practices only hire fellows nowadays. So I think that you're right about the marketability and putting yourself at the top of the group out there. And I think that residencies have evolved over time. And I think that the fellowships really have helped define skills. So, the other thing that sometimes you don't get at a fellowship is billing and coding. To the same Hey, Raymond, would you mind putting yourself on mute, please? Thank you. So basically, and then the last thing I was mentioning was about the connections and the connections that you make. And I think that's really invaluable. As we go through our careers, the more contacts we make, the more people who we meet will help us in the long run for those connections.
And I agree with that. The other thing is the fellowships actually are starting to work both ways. So we have obviously students and residents that come in that are interested in furthering themselves with their fellowship training, but we're now starting to see job sites actually contacting us. I don't know, Andrew, if you've gotten emails, but I've gotten usually about 4 or 5 emails a year where I have somebody saying, hey, we're looking for a fellowship trained person. Do you have any recommendations? So that's another I guess thing to think about is we actually become kind of a job connection for a lot of people looking for jobs, or I guess a lot of places looking for people to employ. And that is something that we'll talk a little bit more about towards the end of this conversation, because the state of Florida is really trying to build on this networkability of fellows for that very reason, because we want to be able to help each other out as we all grow into our profession and find our unique places, because each one of us has different interests and different experiences and different things we can bring to the profession, and that's kind of the next segment is what the fellowship skills or experiences are needed to take the next step in the career. And the thing that comes to mind is there's Stephen Covey had this quote. I don't know if you remember him, but he said, always start with the end in mind. And so I think those of you that are sitting out there trying to figure out what you're going to do as your next step professionally, really think about who you want to be in 5 years or 7 years or 10 years. And I think that look at your goals and then see the best pathway to get there. And it could very well be through, doing a fellowship. And by the way, the word fellowship is kind of a funny word, because you can't just say all fellowships are the same. I mean, all of the fellowship sites offer very different experiences. So there's not only opportunity to fine tune your skills, but also to potentially find a fellowship that really matches what you're looking to get out of your career, whether it's because you want to go into academia or you want to join an ortho group, or maybe a podiatry group, or even a pediatric focus or sports medicine focus group. I think you really have to look at yourself, find out what you want out of your career, and then start making the map, even as a student or early resident, on how you're going to achieve that goal. And I think that some of these, when you're looking at a list of 50 or 60 programs, it can be really intimidating. But if you pretty much know where you want to end up, you want to go into diabetic Charcot reconstruction, that's a thing that you love, then you can go down that list and find the 8 or 9 programs that really seem to specialize in that. So I think that that's important, is always start with the end in mind.
Yeah, I think I echo that. I mean, the long-term goal of what you're trying to achieve is really important. And that's why, for me, when I came out of my residency program, I got a lot of surgical experience. I got a lot of hospital-based experience, but my deficiency was a little bit in private practice. And it took me 10, 20 years for me to develop my current practice the way it is now, the way I like it. And I think the way we've maximized it. So I think one of the benefits of certain fellowships nowadays, I'm not saying that you can't get this in residency. What I'm saying is that certain fellowships, they may allow you to have a little more integration with private practice type setting. So if your goal is to go into a private practice, you may want to go to get a little bit more experience in a fellowship that has that type of centralization of a private practice type environment. Or if you say, hey, I want to work for academia or a hospital-based practice, then maybe targeting a hospital-based fellowship or academic type fellowship may be the way to go for you. So have that in mind when you're evaluating the different places that you're thinking about taking your career to the next level. So Adam, let me ask you another question. If somebody is out there interested in doing a fellowship, where do they start? What's kind of the next step here?
Well, I think you got to get familiar with all the resources. So I think one of the best places to start, because they have the ACFAS Fellowship Initiative, is basically at the ACFAS website, where they feature all the different programs that are available. They're all ACFAS recognized, and we'll talk about the difference between recognized and then which is ACFAS status versus the CPME, which is an approved status. But either one of those sites, CPME or ACFAS, that's really one of the best places to just start getting information about the fellowships. And then each site that's listed, most of us have websites that you can go to and start reading about each fellowship site and kind of what their specialties are, what their focus is. Is it, a 10-person training group? Is it more hands-on, quiet experience with one or two physicians? Is it in an academic setting? Is it in a private practice setting? Is it ortho group? I mean, there's a lot of different types of fellowships available because the settings that they're in are different. And that's probably the biggest thing for me when I was trying to figure out, do I want my site to be ACFAS recognized or CPME approved? There are pretty significant differences, and CPME approved is a little bit closer ties to a residency. So in fact, they have to be affiliated with a current residency, and there's a lot of interaction between the residents and the fellow, where ACFAS is a little bit more, I guess, liberal in terms of where you set the fellowship up. It doesn't necessarily have to have the strong academic ties to a current residency, and we don't have the same sort of requirements in terms of numbers that we have to fill. How the logs look. It's a little bit more favorable towards, I guess, specialization in terms of the interest. So getting familiar with the list of fellowships. And then the other source is just going to meetings and talking to people who are currently doing fellowships or who have previously done fellowships. I think just talking it through and kind of bending people's ears about it. What was their experience like? Were they happy with it? Did they gain a lot out of it compared to what they had in residency? So I just think, early on in the search, it's just really important to see as much as you can. And then FPMA, we are processing and trying to hone in on a more focused fellowship society in the state of Florida. And we don't have the resources posted yet, but we're hoping to have that soon. So there will be a lot of different places you can look to get more information about fellowships. And the other part was just kind of what I said before is, just ask questions about yourself. What are you interested in? What do you see yourself doing? Do you have any specialty areas that you really like? I mean, my fellowship really focuses on new product innovation and utilizing, advanced techniques, total ankle replacement, applications of 3D printing. So those are the areas that I focus my program. Other programs, like I said, are more diabetic related. Some of them are research related. So you just kind of have to start to filter the programs and creating a master list, which ones are all arounders, which ones have more focus on a specific topic, and does that fit what you're looking for? And then the other question, Andrew, let me ask you this. Do you think it's more important to just do a fellowship, or do you think it's better to find a fellowship that absolutely suits your needs, like fits you perfect who you are professionally? What do you think is more important between the two?
Yeah, I don't think everybody has to do a fellowship for the sake of doing it. I really don't. I think there's a lot of resources out there that can help you grow professionally. For me personally, I didn't do a fellowship. There was less available to me, and at the time, and I felt that my residency gave me significant good exposure to multiple aspects of what I'm doing nowadays. But I'll tell you, I'm not the same doc I was back then, and I've evolved. And I think if you put in the time yourself to continue to grow, to continue to learn, and to continue to go to cadaver labs and to read and to present and to be involved in academics, you can grow at the same rate of any of us can. You can supplement what people might be getting at a fellowship through those techniques and those means. So I don't think everybody has to do a fellowship. But on the other hand, I think there's some unique opportunities with them in that you can get a little bit more, you can hasten that timeline. You can have a mentor there that can work with you and kind of speed that timeline up a little bit for everybody. The other thing is that, you know, it's hard to know what each fellowship is and if it's right for you. It's really a difficult thing. And I think that really there's no harm in asking, you know, talking to the fellow that goes there now, talking to old fellows who graduated and find out, you know, what kind of environment is this? Is the fellowship director right? You know, is he compatible with my type of personality? What are the types of things they're doing there? And is that going to help me in my career? Is it going to supplement what I feel like I've not gotten enough of? And, you know, will that make me better off in the long run? And the other thing I will say is that sometimes we don't apply to fellowships, or sometimes young members don't apply to fellowships because they don't think that they will get it. They don't think that they can qualify for the program. And I would say that it's not always the guy with the straight A student that gets it. It's not always the guy that went to the powerhouse residency program, whatever that is nowadays. I think it's really depends upon, you know, your genuine need to continue your education, to expand, grow, and to complement and find your niche in your career of how you can really shine and become an outstanding doc.
That's a really good segue, I think, to the next part, which is, you know, getting prepared for the application process and what are the what are the different steps of this? Maybe, you know, when do you apply? When do you submit? Letters of interest? Like you said, phone calls to previous and past fellows. How would you outline the process, Andrew? Like, what do you like to see in terms of fellows? Like, how soon is too soon to get involved or in touch with a fellowship you might be interested in?
Well, I think when you're a resident first year, you don't really know what you want, if you even want a fellowship by the third year or not. But I think it never is too early to at least inquire, to listen. That's why we have this type of webinar tonight, is to get a little more insight into, is this right for me? Is it not? But I think step one is, number one, see if you have interest in this as far as expanding yourself. Evaluating where you want to be in 5 to 10 years. And then really it's about going after what you want. I can't emphasize that enough. You know, if you put one email out to me and I don't respond, it may be in my spam box. Adam, you know that all too well. But the point is that don't give up. I mean, you have to go after what you want. One of my second fellows, I mean, he was relentless. He went after it. He did everything he had to do to get this program. And you know what? He had a good reputation. He was very smart, and he went for it, and we ended up taking him. But the point is that I think you can never follow up and treat it like a business. You're trying to become CEO of Pfizer or something. It's going to take a lot of effort. It's going to take a lot of applications and submitting things the right way. Always dress for when you're interviewing. Speak professionally. Be punctual. Go to interviews. When people come to me the first time, they're like, I want to come visit your program. I'm like, fine, come on. So when they come visit, I say, this first visit is not for me. I'm not judging you. I want you to know that this program might be right for you. So you're going to have to go more than one time visiting, if the director will allow for that, obviously. but I think you're just going to have to be consistent about being, following through with what your desire is. I mean, what about you, Adam? Like, what applications stand out for you, and what can a resident make them feel more important for you?
So a couple of things on that. I'm going to digress into a little bit of a story, but I read this article about how this famous CEO picked the person that he was going to hire, and he was notorious for being one of the best pickers of talent. And so that's why this business journal was really interested in interviewing him. He said, honestly, he said CVs are, they can be impressive, but they can be very misleading. And I would say as a fellowship director, I've become more and more aware of it, because every application comes with CVs, and you can be really wooed by a CV, and sometimes some CVs they don't quite tell you a lot about the person. Um, but anyhow, what he would do is he would bring these people in for a meeting, and they would walk around. He'd show them all over the corporate business and everything. But always about halfway through the interview, they would stop and get a cup of coffee, and he always, said, "Oh, this is Marlena. She makes the best coffee around. Let me get you a cup of coffee." So they get a cup of coffee, and then they would continue the tour. He'd never stay and let them sit and drink the coffee. You'd have to take it with you. And as they were walking around, his observation of this person was more based on what they did with that cup of coffee, and more importantly, what they did with it after the interview was over. So if they just simply put the coffee cup down and shook the hand and said, "Oh, this has been awesome. I look forward to hearing from you. I can't wait to work for you," that's not going to be somebody that really impresses that CEO. The person that says, "Hey, can you show me how to get back to the kitchen? I want to put this coffee back, where I got it from." That's more impressive when somebody goes the extra mile. And that might not be the most impressive CV, but that's somebody that's taking ownership of the process without even working there. And I've had a lot of visitations with different residents and students that have come through. The ones that impress me are always the ones that are very thoughtful to the staff, and they're not just uber focused on me. It's just more about seeing them in the clinic, and they ask, not just academic questions, but questions out of concern for the patient. We're not just interviewing academically, we're interviewing basically for a marriage partner for the next year, and somebody that we want to really spend a lot of time and a lot of effort training and helping them take that next step of their career. So there's a lot to think about. So it's not just all about academics. It's like Andrew said, it's being persistent, it's having drive. The people who just write a note and say, "Here's my application, I'm interested in your program," and that's it, might not get as much consideration as somebody that spends time introducing themselves and saying why they're interested in this particular program, because this caught their eye, or this caught their attention. I think that just shows that they've done their homework, and that they're really truly interested in what you as a site have to offer. So those are some, I guess, some insights from on the inside looking out as we get these applications coming through. How about you, Andrew? What stands out to you?
Well, certainly it's really hard to pick somebody that's amazing out of a sea of amazing people, and especially if they all look great on the CVs. I think one of the things what I do when I see an application is I'll review it. I'll look at I do look at their grades, because I just want to see what their academic prowess is. I want to see, what they've done, some of the articles they've written. And I really also look at some of their letters of recommendation, because for me, that really, those people know these residents much better than I ever would in a 5-minute, 10-minute, or even a 3-hour meeting. And so I really do think about that, and I've given a little more emphasis on that lately compared to in the past, and I think that that's helped me to continue to improve my picking skills, so to speak. But I think the other thing is those just kind of get you in the door, and then from there I like to then see what kind of interaction I have with them. Unfortunately, everybody has to realize being a fellowship director is a long and arduous process. We don't get more money for every minute we spend interviewing or having somebody visit us, just like you don't get money as a resident visiting, fellowships. So it really is important to both of us to get it right, like dating. And it's hard. It's hard to speed date sometimes. So I think that you just have to be yourself. I look for somebody who can be themselves. I know it's hard because you get nervous, but be themselves, be professional, and just kind of, the comment you made earlier just about how they act with people around them, that is funny because one of the employed physicians that we just hired, a podiatrist, she came to my office in literally 10 minutes. She had memorized every medical assistant's name, and even some people I don't even know who they are. And the point is that like she took the time to give them and empower them. And she is one of my closest friends now. And honestly, the staff loves her more than they do me. That's okay. But the point is that that's the kind of person that I look for, is somebody who really, treats everybody with respect.
I think that's an awesome point. Actually, my very first fellow, I had interviewed one person, and that was it for that year. And the very first day that we went to the OR, I think it was actually the second day, he knew people's names that I didn't even know, and I've been there for 5 years. And so that really does leave a big impression when you go the extra mile. And I have been very fortunate with the fellows that I've had so far, that every single one of them goes out of their way to make the staff feel comfortable, because that's the persona that I try to give as well. So I think you got to kind of match the persona of the program you're going to, and each program definitely has its own personality, because it's going to be based on the environment. So getting to know the environment, if that's going to be an environment that you can excel in, that's obviously a huge thing for you. But one other question I have for you, Andrew. You get down to, I mean, and you said this earlier, I think the problem is we've been getting a lot of really, really solid applications. I mean, I think already we have over 20 this year that have shown interest. And I can say that pretty much every single one of them would make an excellent fellow. So when you get down to your top 3 or 4, as a director, kind of talking to a group of residents that's looking at this process, what is your, how do you pick once you get down to those 3 or 4? What's the juju that you're looking for?
Oh, that's tough. I mean, listen, I kind of look for a mini me. I really do. I think, and not to toot my own horn, but some of the things I've done are to give back to our profession. With President FPMA, being part of ASPS, just trying to lecture and give back to our profession. And I consider myself one of the leaders, not the greatest leader, but one of them. And I really look for somebody who can then carry on that legacy and become the next leader of our profession. So I want somebody with a lot of drive. I want somebody who can take the skills that I give them, or at least I help them develop, and then really take it to the next level and even excel beyond what I could even imagine them doing. And so I look for that wow factor. I look for that factor of who's going to take it to the next level, who's going to do even better than me, because that's a positive reflection upon me. And in reality, we all look for that type of situation. What about you, Adam?
I'm right with you. I think that I really try to hear what they're looking for, and kind of I like to hear about people's plans 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and yeah, absolutely. I want them, every person I train, I want them to be better than I was in my career, and I know that pretty much all the ones that we're talking to today all have a huge opportunity to do that, because technology is going to be better. Accessibility is going to be better. The training is going to be better. These are things that have been evolving as our profession has evolved. And I think every single fellow that applies, I usually send an email back and just say, number one, congratulations on your decision to pursue fellowship, because I think that's a huge decision. And to me, that already says something, that they want something more out of their career than just showing up and collecting a paycheck. But I really look for the drive, the passion, and just some sort of connection to where they want to go. And I don't want to say it's like a mini me, because I don't want anybody to, I wouldn't wish that upon anybody actually. But I just want to see somebody that just really wants to give back. And there's a lot of different ways to give back. It's either through missionary work, or standing on a podium, or contributing to the literature, or taking a leadership position. everybody has their spot, and if there's a way that I can help them get there, then that gets me excited. So I want to feel not only are they going to be a good match for me, but I'll be a good match for them as a mentor. So I try to look both ways. But it is really hard. You get to those final few, and it's really like a flip of a coin. You can literally see yourself with any one of them and have an outstanding experience. What I will say is that the fellowship personality also changes based on the fellow, and especially as you get to some of the more fellowship centric programs or fellow centric programs. The personalities can change too. So I look for that personality that's kind of easy to be around, and I know that staff is going to enjoy being around. And the little intangibles, like like you said, remembering people's names, that's something that's really stuck out with you. It is hard, and I will say that sometimes in a real close tiebreaker, I'll call my previous fellows, because chances are they've talked to a lot of the real serious candidates, and I'll get their opinions. And a lot of times they're dead on. They'll say, oh, I was really, really impressed with this person because X, Y, and Z. And that really ends up landing weight. And then Andrew and I have done this. Sometimes we'll call each other and say, hey, who are you looking at? And we start sharing information, and we'll both walk away having sometimes a very similar top list, which is great. And if one of us gets the person that we were hoping for, and we're excited, and we have 2 other people that we can highly recommend, or 3 other people, or 5 other people, it doesn't matter. I mean, we've had a lot of good candidates. Or sometimes the person that you were really hoping ends up signing on somewhere else, and you have a group of directors you can call and know that they're a good judgment of character as well, and get their opinion. So, the fellowship directors do talk to some degree, and also kind of figure this out, because we're all trying to advance the profession. And I think, this is a great opportunity for all of us to work together on it.
Yeah, I have to say that I also use our fellow, especially, as they progress in their career, because one of the things I try to impress upon our fellows is that, hey, listen, this is a family. You're going to want the guy after you to succeed as well, because then they're going to be a reflection of where you came from. And so I think that helps them get involved in, like, hey, here's some positive with this, applicant, and here's some, things that you may want to look for. So I think I've started becoming more valuable, our fellows' opinion a little bit as well. But again, I still make my decision independent of that. It's more of an issue of they may know them, and a little bit more of a, as I get older, they're kind of in the same age group as well. So it makes it a little easier for them to, kind of know them in a little bit more of an intimate setting.
So another question for you is, obviously, if you have 20 or 30 people applying for one spot, there's a lot of rejections. And not every person is going to get the fellowship program that they wanted, or even get a fellowship at all. What's your advice for the people who don't get fellowships that were really set on it?
Well, that's a tough one. I mean, I think it depends on what their goals are. I think, there's, and it also depends upon the job market that's out there as well. First, for some, if the job market is slim, if they have an interest in staying in an area, they may want to keep at it for the future years. They may want to do a preceptorship. I mean, there's really nothing wrong with doing these types of things to, kind of better yourself. And as I mentioned earlier, just because you don't do a fellowship doesn't mean you can't excel in the profession and be a leader. I mean, it just, you're going to have to do it through different means. So I wouldn't be disappointed if you don't get a fellowship. It just means that in that particular situation, it didn't match. And I'm sure that happens, but don't let that stop you, and don't let that not let you pursue excellence. I mean, you should still go after it in any way possible. Go to cadaver labs, do research, do this, do that, and find your niche of where you excel. And I think that's what the advice I would give to them. I mean, what do you tell your people who don't get accepted?
Well, I've always really strongly believed that one door closed is 5 doors open. You just have to have the eyes to look for them. And a good example is myself. I signed on to do a residency at Palmetto General, specifically because they did a 6-month fellowship at Hadassah Medical Center in Israel. So it was built into the program, which was the only program at the time that had a fellowship associated with it. And right before I was supposed to go, we had September 11th, and my fellowship opportunity went bye-bye, literally like overnight. Um, and then I was able to get funding from DePuy because I was still interested in doing fellowship, and we had everything arranged. And I was supposed to actually go with Guido Laporta for a year, and I had seeked out funding to get that. And literally 2 weeks before I was going to move to Scranton, Pennsylvania, I got a call from DePuy saying that he had a fallout with them and he moved over to SBI, and the fellowship was no longer going to happen. So again, I was the second time in a row where I was denied access to fellowship. But as Andrew said, go by what you're passionate about. I ended up doing a mini fellowship in Russia. I did a AO fellowship. I got really interested in that, and I trained in Germany. I've had several high-end workshops, plastic surgical workshops, and I was able to kind of piece together my fellowship training, although it wasn't all in one consistent year. I had a lot of mini fellowships, and then when I joined the group in Indianapolis, I actually came with funding, and we used that to basically sponsor myself into a fellowship for my first several months with American Health Network. And then that ended up becoming the American Health Network Fellowship. That was the funding that got that fellowship started. So that's a good example of sometimes it doesn't work out, and you can still make it work if you have the passion and the follow through. And I actually several of the people that it didn't end up getting our program last year, I wrote personalized letters to and just encourage them to not stop the hunt for it, not stop the hunt for advancing themselves, because fellowship isn't the only way to do it. There's a lot of different ways to still give back to the profession, and it doesn't mean that it's not attainable to do all the things that you envision yourself doing in 5 years. The fellowship is one way to get there, but it's, I kind of look at it as like a Cliff's Notes of the first 5 years of practice. We can wrap up all the butterflies and everything that we had for 5 years and try to give the fellow that experience within 1 year so they hit the ground running. But ultimately, people who are very passionate are going to get to the same spot. Maybe some had more of a direct path than others. But I wouldn't stop pursuing it. And in fact, last year, I even had a couple repeat people who had gone off and taken a job somewhere and still reapplied for fellowship. And I was really excited to see that, because I think it's important to keep pursuing it.
I have to echo the fact that if, sometimes when you get a door closed in front of you, actually it works out for the best. I mean, it happened to me in my residency. I had this primary care residency, and I was very disappointed. And it actually ended up being phenomenal. I got plastic surgery experience and vascular experience, and it was one of the best experiences of my whole life. And it was my first year. And then I ended up landing a very busy surgical residency. But so, yeah, I mean, sometimes it doesn't fall the way we want it to fall, but it's what you make of it. So I agree with that. I'd like to make a quick little switch of topics here and kind of add a little realism to this discussion. Fellowships are great and everything. We speak very highly of them, but there are two different types of fellowships. There's the CPME fellowships, which are actually certified by the CPME, and then there are non-CPME fellowships. So it's do your research on what fellowships actually are approved and certified through the board, and which ones are not approved. Now, in today's society, I don't think it's as crucial, meaning there are certain organizations that still see a fellowship, whether it's unofficial or official, as a benefit, especially if it comes with experience from somebody who's reputable. But realize that the ACFAS recognition status is really just that. It's a method to recognize that a fellowship has attained a certain minimum threshold of standards that tries to keep all of the fellowships across the United States that are in this same category on even ground. It's hard to make that happen, but it's one of those things where it's only recognized by ACFAS. Now that in today's society, that's actually pretty good because ACFAS is very well known and it's very involved with surgery, and it's one of the leading standards for surgical standards, or one of the companies for surgical standards. But there's also CPME approved fellowships, and those are actually authorized, and they're done usually through hospital settings or academic settings. One of the reasons why I think I gravitated to the ACFAS designation is because in my hospital, they were reluctant to sponsor or co-sponsor or participate with a fellowship program. And even at one of the teaching institutions that I teach medicine residents at, they were also reluctant to integrate a fellowship program. So according to CPME guidelines, because of that one reason, we ended up self-funding our program, meaning we pay for the residents and all their benefits. And because of that, we don't qualify for CPME funding. So just know your standards and know what you're getting into. Not all of the programs have CPME backing to them. I haven't found it to be a problem yet for some of our graduates, but I just want you to know what you're getting into when you look at the different programs, and you have to see the good and the bad, or not that that's a bad, but the good and the real life scenario of what's going on. And hopefully that'll change one day, but it's going to take a little bit of legislation or a little bit of finagling CPME to do that.
Something that's coming up is with this next ACFAS meeting, they're going to be doing each fellowship program is giving a 2 or 3 minute video that we have to prepare to introduce ourselves as directors. And I actually think it's a fantastic idea. So you get to, when you're looking down a list, it's just a lot of names of people that you don't really know unless you've heard about that particular program. So I think these videos are going to be really helpful. So I don't know when they're going to be posted. I think it's going to be right around the ACFAS meeting, but if you have access, I would definitely hop online and do that. They have a meet and greet breakfast, which will also be a really nice way to start to get to know some of the the fellowship directors and some of the programs and the current fellows. So I encourage you to check that out. Real quick, Andrew, I was just gonna, these are quick fire questions, but one of the questions I get is, what do you ask when you visit a residence or a fellowship? What can you ask the director to get to know them better? And I was just going to give some questions that you guys might want to write down. One would be, how much hands-on experience does the fellow get? I think it is important to know if the fellowship is acquainted with the residency, because that might give you an idea of kind of what in surgery, what your, I don't want to say competition is, but when you are in a residency program, typically the fellow is always going to typically take precedence in terms of surgical experience over a resident, which may be good or maybe not be good for that particular residency. But you definitely want to know how much hands-on experience the fellows have. Do they have fellowship clinic? Do they have the opportunity to see patients on their own? What is the fellow's schedule look like? That might be something that you'd want to talk to the fellow about. What's their daily drag look like? Are they on call? What are their weekends like? You want to ask how many doctors work actively in the program versus how many are affiliated. In our program, we have a bunch of doctors that, are always invited to our academic meetings and stuff. But as far as actual active doctors, hands-on training, that number's, less. Doesn't mean it's less valuable. But those are the sort of things that I would be asking. The other thing is just timelines. Each program is going to have a different timeline to pick their fellows and when they want applications due. So ACFAS does have shed some light on that. I will say this past year, I don't know about Andrew, but we ended up with COVID doing a lot of our interviews on Zoom, which we're still doing. And as a result, our timeline was moved up quite a bit. We ended up picking our fellow, I believe, at the end of September or beginning of October, which was quite different than the year before when I had the deadline at the end of November. And I think it's also out of appreciation to people looking for fellowships. They kind of want to know earlier if they're getting what they want or if they need to move on to something else. So just be familiar with those deadlines. And kind of think of the questions that you want to ask. I just sit down and just really try to find out what's important to you. If you're really particularly interested, for example, in ankle replacement, how many ankle replacements is the fellow doing a year, participating in? What devices are you guys using? Or, is it going to be all one device, or will I have access to, multiple types of ankle replacements? Those are the sort of questions that you really want to delve into, especially as you start to understand what your particular interests are.
I'd like to say something about the timeline. For me, we were pretty strict in the beginning of waiting till, December and just kind of picking at that point, waiting. Unfortunately, right now, it's a little bit of the wild, wild west when it comes to fellowships and timelines, and each fellowship is doing their own kind of manipulation of the timeline, so to speak, so if they come across an awesome fellow, they're probably going to pick them pretty quickly. So I would say that I would put your feelers out in your second year for sure, very early on, even if it's just to learn a little more about the programs that you might have some interest in. I would reach out to the fellow and find out if you can ask them some questions. They're all usually very good. They want to help you. They were in your spot beforehand, and they're willing to give back. That's just the kind of people that they usually are. Reaching out to the directors is also fine. A lot of times it's better if you learn a little bit about the program first before you start speaking to the director. So, if there's a support staff or somebody like that, I kind of reach out to them and inquire about it. And then as you become more and more interested and kind of start honing down on an area or a specific fellowship, I would maybe consider asking if you can visit, maybe do a Zoom call. Sometimes you catch them at the wrong time and they're busy and they can't meet with you. And sometimes you catch them at the right time and they're like, oh yeah, sure. Zoom tends to be pretty easy nowadays as we're on it right now. And so it may be a quick an hour that you can spend in the evening time to answer some questions. But remember, if there's 30 or 40 applicants, it adds up on, it's 40 hours of time for even just a 1 hour Zoom call that we have to spend. So we want it to count, we want it to be concise, and we want to make sure that you know what our program is about so that you can say, yep, this is for me and this is the one I want, and here's who I am and here's how I plan on landing the program there. I want to take a quick pause. Is there any other, we go to some questions for just a minute?
Yeah, so Aaron Lewis wrote, is there an application deadline or timeline that most programs follow, asking for 2022, 2023? And I think we just kind of touched on that a little bit. I think that we've already started to see people sending in applications for 2022, 2023. We've had several visitors. And like Andrew said, these timelines, you can't really go by what's posted on ACFAS as the deadline for applications, because a lot of programs are starting to kind of get feelers out and pick a little bit earlier. And I think I'll probably always wait until after the current fellow starts, because I want them to have, kind of get to know the people coming in, because this is as much their program and their legacy that they're leaving behind. And I think I value the fellow's input, and I think it's also important for the prospective fellow to talk to the current fellow. So that hopefully, Aaron, that answers your question.
Yeah, there's another question here about, do you have any advice, recommendations for those navigating through the application cycle in regards to visiting the program? Do you recommend sending a complete application before requesting a visit? We get this a lot recently, and I would say that, to have some random resident say, I want to come visit your program, we're usually very open to those types of things. However, after a while, it can become tedious and difficult, especially to put you behind in clinic, and you want to teach the guy as much as you can, even though he's not there for that reason. I think you should send something about who you are and your interest, whether it's a letter of intent or a letter of interest, some background information about yourself. And that kind of helps get the ball rolling, and it helps the fellowship director know that you have a little bit more skin in the game. You're just not looking to visit every program that's in the neighborhood because you're on spring break or whatnot. So I think that's step one. Step two is following through with letters of, thank you for letting me come visit. Just giving a quick text or an email or something like that. I think that just goes a long way to keep reinforcing. And honestly, it's hard to remember every single person that came to visit you, especially if you have 30 or 40 people. or that many applications. For me, I'll accept applications early, and I'll kind of briefly look at them, and I'll put them in my, okay, here's my pile of applications. And then when it gets a little closer in time and my current scenario is a little easier to manage, then I'll kind of come back to those pile, and we'll start that evaluation process a little bit more thoroughly. I don't know if
Yeah,
that
and I was
helps.
gonna say it's never too early to get started, even if you're a first year, even if you're a student. Honestly, take initiative. Pursue with passion what you're passionate about, and we will never ever fault somebody for wanting to find out more early, because to us that's actually a very positive sign. So. Not saying inundate everybody right halfway through your first
Yeah.
year, but there's never really too early of a time to start. And just remember, a lot of the programs, because we're not like a residency where there's a national residency pick day or selection day, a lot of these are going to be based on very personal connections, who's visited, the kind of the friendships and professional relationships that have fostered throughout the couple years leading up to the point where you have to pick a fellow. If you get a chance to see somebody at a meeting or introduce yourself, if we're into fellowship training, that means we're pretty passionate and pretty open to meeting people, and we want to make sure that people in our profession continue to drive it forward. And like Andrew said, a couple times tonight, it's all about helping people become better doctors than we are ourselves. And if there's anything we can, any role that we can play in that, then we're super excited about it. And there's nothing more rewarding to us than to seeing people go off and be super successful. And good example is I had somebody visit me this week, and he's a resident at a program of somebody who was our fourth fellow in Indianapolis, and now he's the head of that residency program. And it's just really kind of cool to see that full circle. See somebody that's being trained by somebody that I trained, and that's really rewarding for us as directors. So we challenge you to be the best version of you possible, and if there's anything that we can do to help you get there, then we're totally ecstatic. Real quick, Andrew, can you touch on some of the things that the state is doing, FPMA is doing for fellowships, kind of what our vision of that initiative is and where we think it could go?
Yeah, I'll try to be quick because I think Karen's giving me the eye that we're running out of time. But basically, this was kind of a brainchild of both of ours, and we decided that we wanted to integrate FPMA and in turn APMA with this kind of collaboration amongst the Florida-based fellowship programs as a starting point. We had higher aspirations of kind of taking this a little bit national too, but for right now, we're still at the state level, and we feel like there's a lot of great programs at the state that we wanted to help self-promote and to become almost like elevate the overall excellence of all the fellowships in the state. And by collaboration and involvement with the state's association, we felt we could do that successfully. At prior meetings, we've had fellowship tracks where we've allowed our fellows and the directors to have a lecture series where they've given lectures on different their cutting edge research or things of that nature. So basically the different things of that nature and collaboration amongst that. At our upcoming meeting in Bonita, we're also having a meet and greet with the fellowship directors who are going to be there. So I think during a lunchtime on Saturday, I believe, for this upcoming meeting in Bonita, there'll be set up almost similar to ACFAS, where there'll be set up similar tables, and you can kind of meet and greet. You can spend some quality one-on-one with a fellowship director or their fellow, whoever that program chooses to designate as their representative, and then kind of learn a little more about the programs there. So FPMA is really working hard to help with that process, and and there's also a medical society that is a 501c3 that we're working with to also help with some funding of some educational programs as well. So
yeah, and just a little I guess insight to where we're hoping to go. This is kind of the kickoff to a whole series of webinars throughout the year for FPMA. And Andrew, myself, and Karen Lambert have been talking about having a fellowship based one of these probably on a monthly basis, where each fellowship program would have the chance to kind of present their research and or interesting surgeries that they've been doing, or points of interest, or even just have an academic meeting like journal club. So the way we envision is all residents will be available, and it'll be a chance for you guys to be able to visit each site without being on site to visit. I think that would be a really good opportunity for you. So we don't have it organized just yet, but look for that sometime this next year.
We're getting really to the end of the hour. Is there any other questions that anybody want to chat on? Karen, did you get any from your end?
Dr. Belis, I did get one question. It
Okay.
is, are DPMs allowed/qualified to apply for AOFAS fellowships as well?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that one.
So
Adam,
I mean, I can tell you that there have been some unmatched foot and ankle fellowships that have become filled by a podiatry resident or incoming fellow. I would say that not all of them are going to be podiatric friendly. In fact, probably a lot of them will not be, but there might be an occasional one. But I think that's going to be just more on, kind of knowing about that program and whether or not they've matched. I don't know that blanketing AOFAS with applications will net something, but you never know. And that's one way to kind of break down barriers. I know our fellowship site, we have one of our the main guys that's training is an MD, a foot and ankle, and I think we've opened up his eyes a lot to what our training is, and I think that's what the fellowship initiative is really about. So maybe one day we'll see that more commonplace, but right now I would say it's there, but it's kind of by luck.
Yeah, I agree. We have an MD foot and ankle orthopod that helps train our fellows. But listen, every area is very different. There's resistance in certain areas more than others. I think you just have to feel out the area that you're going to, or wherever the fellowship is, and kind of see what you can do accordingly. But again, I think we're at the end of the hour. I just want to say I wish everybody, if you're looking for a fellowship, the best of luck. Stick with it. Don't do it halfway. Do it if you're going to do it. Do it. Stick with it and be committed to it. And if you don't get a fellowship, or if you feel like this is not for you, don't give up education. That worked for me, and I think it's going to make each of you successful. So those are my parting words. Thank you for attending. Adam, any last word?
No, it's pretty much the same. Just really listen to yourself and be true to yourself and what your passions are, and hopefully you can use fellowship as a tool in your toolbox to sharpen what you want to get out of the profession. And we are all excited about being your potential fellowship director. And we wish you the best luck in the process. And if there's anything that Andrew and I can do personally, feel free to reach out to us if you have access or questions about how the state's doing things. We're here.
Now, don't leave. One thing, Karen, are you going to tell us who won?
There's the drum roll. I hear it.
Who won the $100?
Karen, did you want me to make the announcement? Okay, perfect. So the winner is Dr. AJ Rustia. FPMA should be reaching out to you shortly to get your address so that we can mail the gift card over. Thank you, everybody.
Congratulations. Thank you.
Yeah, congratulations. And just remember, we take Starbucks gift certificates for doing this tonight. I'm just kidding. No, spend it wisely, and maybe you can use it for a plane ticket to visit some of the programs.
Good luck, everybody. Thank you so much.